Karl. I'm Patrick Ryan, President of the Tennessee World Affairs Council. Tonight we're privileged to bring a special edition of the program with Senator Bob Corker. He was U.S. Senator from Tennessee from 2007 to 2018. They'll be talking about the United States' place in the world and challenges we face. Bob Corker is a successful businessman, former United States Senator, and was previously named one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine. As mentioned, Senator Corker represented Tennesseans in the Senate from 2007 to 2018, where he served as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and became a national and global thought leader on fiscal, financial, and foreign policy issues. He was Tennessee's Commissioner of Finance and Mayor of Chattanooga before being elected to the Senate, but he spent most of his life in business. This evening, Senator Corker and Mayor Dean will be talking about the challenges the United States faces abroad and the impact of international developments on the state of Tennessee. And now, Mayor Karl Dean and Senator Bob Corker.
Well, thank you, Pat. And Senator Corker, welcome to Global Nashville, and thank you for taking the time out of your, I'm sure, busy schedule to do this.
Mayor, I'm glad to do it. I respect so much what you did while you were mayor, and the city's it's just blossoming. It's unbelievable what's happening there. So thanks for having me. And Pat, thank you for seeing me again. I've loved seeing you in our offices when you would come up. If I could, Mayor, I do want to just give a disclaimer. I used to get info coming into my office every morning about 4:30 in the morning, or to me. I had prime ministers, foreign ministers, defense ministers in the office almost daily, and I did weekend trips to places like Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan and other places. I've done none of that for 2 years and 3 months, and so you're probably more up to speed on foreign policy than I am right now, but I'll try to make it through this. Please don't ask me any tough questions, though.
I will not, but I am sure you have you know more than most of us, and certainly more than me. Well, first, let me just say something about your service as mayor of Chattanooga. I know you have gone on to do great work for the state. You've gone on to be a very distinguished U.S. Senator, but you certainly, I think, amongst mayors, are known for the huge success you had as mayor of Chattanooga when you helped redevelop that community, put Chattanooga on the map as one of the most exciting cities in America. And I personally thank you, because every time I think I encountered you when I was mayor and you were senator, you always said I had the best job in the world being a mayor.
You did. You did.
You always made me feel good.
Well, you definitely did. And you had such impact, and you did it so gracefully. So anyway, my hat's off to you. And, there was Chattanooga envy for a little while by folks in Nashville, and then you guys just took over the world. So, people all around the world and certainly around the country are looking at Nashville. It's such a wonderful place to be. And of course, I think Chattanooga is too, and thank you for that. But
yeah, well, certainly, I mean, everybody in the United States looks at what you did in the riverfront in Chattanooga as being an example of how a city needs to, direct itself toward its river, build around that, improve the community, and you're sort of the model. So,
yeah, well, thank you.
Well, let me ask you this to start with. What have you been up to?
Well, it's been an interesting transition, and I've been through several. I was Commissioner of Finance, as you mentioned, and then I had some time to transition. I sold a company when I was 37. I had time to transition, and so I've learned to be patient. And especially at my age at 68, what you don't want to do is make a mistake that you have to unwind. And Admiral Mullen and David Petraeus and others would counsel me before I was leaving about certainly doing that. But I immersed myself back in the community. I have been very involved in business. It's something that I really missed. I woke up, Mayor, one day and was doing the math. And from the time I was 41 to 66 leaving the Senate, I thought I'd always been a business guy, but I realized for 20 and a half of those 25 years, I'd been running or serving in public office. So, I've immersed myself back here. I am serving as a special advisor to Jefferies, which is an investment bank in New York. I've never been to their offices, obviously, but but I found that interesting. You know, I was more of a different kind of businessman and did things from the ground up, and I'm learned so much. I deal with their people around the world, and it's been interesting. You know, one of the great things about being a senator, the best job in the world is being a mayor, and the best job in the world is being mayor of, especially a mayor of a city where there's 40 council members and no county government. So you no doubt had the best job in America. But one of the things about being a senator is you know you have access to information. There's almost no one that won't call you back, and so the Jeffries piece is somewhat like that in that I'm just seeing so much every day. And I spend about 30% of my time doing that. I'm chairman of a healthcare company that runs clinics for self-insured employers. We've got such great opportunities. I'm going to be over in Nashville on Tuesday interviewing some people. And then I'm chairman of a development operation where I'm providing the equity for some young developers who are outstanding, the best I've ever worked with. And then I'm doing a few other things. So I've got plenty to do. I still get to come over to Nashville and see my grandkids, but it's a good period of time in my life. And I'm very thankful, feel like I'm the most blessed person in the world to have had the experiences I've had, but also to be able to come back home and live a normal life.
Yeah, that's great. When you look back at your service in the Senate and you think about being the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and just your predecessor, let's not forget, was Joe Biden, who was president of the United States. And you think about Henry Cabot Lodge back in the early part of the 20th century, who had such a huge influence on foreign policy. You think of J. William Fulbright and others. I mean, it is one of the top positions in U.S. government. And that was quite an achievement to attain that position. Just give us, how did you enjoy that position? I mean, what was your, when you became chairman, what did you think?
Well, first of all, you're right. I came on the committee. I went on the committee, as I was telling you and Pat earlier, really just to make myself a better senator for people in Tennessee. I had been a mayor, a commissioner of finance. I had built shopping centers all around the country. I knew nothing about foreign policy. I mean, really, I know that you've put a lot of effort into that. I know Pat's put a lot of effort into that, but I really had not. And so I went on the committee and I camped on the committee. One of the things you learn in the Senate is if you're there, you put out the effort. I traveled extensively. I mean, I would do death marches around the world just to find out when something was amiss. I'd go meet with the people. I'd go see what was happening. And of course, just like in business or anything else, you spend 80% of your time on problems and 20% of your time on opportunities. So I didn't spend a lot of time in nice places when I was doing that. But it was an incredibly learning experience, especially as I began to gain seniority. Barack Obama, by the way, was on the committee when I first was there. He, quickly became president. I came and was elected in 06, came in 07, January 3rd. He became president. 2 years later, Vice President Biden became Vice President Biden. And then John Kerry actually took over and was there and he and Dick Lugar were the leaders. And then I became the lead Republican right after the 2012 election. So look, it's foreign relations is the one place I think that we always tried to start every policy move in a bipartisan way. It's the one place. I hope it's still that way. It's hard for me to tell right now, but I never ever considered a piece of legislation ever to come before the committee that didn't have bipartisan co-sponsors, people that had really worked at solving a problem. So look, we had hearings nonstop, Mayor, incredible information flow. As I mentioned, people were in our office, from all around the world, like every day. It was just a tremendous learning experience. Now, the frustration is that really the administrations the White House is so, and the State Department has so much power over the foreign relations area, and to pass a really meaningful bill, it takes so much work, especially if the administration is opposing it. So you find yourself, Mayor, being more of an influencer in many ways, and shaping public opinion and shaping opinion in the Senate and the House. So legislatively, for instance, you know, if you're on appropriations committee, you're doing something every year. If you're on defense, you know, you're passing an authorization every year. Being chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee is different than that. But what an honor it was! You have no idea. Well, you two do, and many of the people tuning in. You have no idea how people around the world look at the United States of America. And obviously, I was representing the United States of America. There was, you know, almost no leader that if I was there would not meet with me. So it was quite an honor. And again, we did extensive traveling around the world, which is really the best way to learn. But it was an honor. It had its frustrations. You know, I'll say one other little thing, something about foreign relations. Sometimes senators think they're taking a free shot. So it's not really going to impact people back home. And one of the toughest things I had to fend off was senators trying to make a name for themselves by being the most, whichever side of the aisle, being the most extreme. And they almost, you know, I felt like sometimes they weren't really thinking about the impact of what that policy would be. And by the way, while we don't do this to other countries, they to us are watching. They're watching what we're doing in the Foreign Relations Committee. They're watching what we're saying. So I think the toughest part of the job was really trying to keep things in the middle of the road and really causing people to realize that the things we did had huge impact in other places. And we needed to be just as thoughtful about those things as some of the policies we tried to put in place back home.
As chairman, what was your vision of what the United States' place in the world should be, or where do you think we should be going in terms of our foreign policy?
So I thought the United States should play the leading role in the world, and not to the extent of looking down at anyone else, but look, we were the most powerful country in the world in every measurable way, and it was up to us to lead. To bring people together, to respect other people's opinion, to respect our alliances, but to demonstrate by example. And Mayor, I to this day believe that in doing so, it makes our own citizenry so much safer, so much better off economically in every way. And so this whole retrenchment that we're not only seeing here and have seen for at least 4 years, but we're seeing in other places. Obviously, we have no foreign policy unless our own country is strong, right? I mean, if we're not strong at home, then we have no foreign policy that's worth carrying out. And that means, by the way, in every way. And when we're divided, which countries see us now, when we're hurting economically, when financially we're in disarray, I'm not saying that's necessarily where we are today, but you know, we don't have the ability to carry out foreign policy. So I just thought that was our role. And I think that our citizenry is so much better off when we assume that mantle. Our ability to convene, our ability to influence has been up until, I mean, China's obviously moving into a very strengthened place themselves, but it has been second to none. And obviously, as you know, Mayor, when you're in a position of strength, you need to demonstrate that strength by being humble, if you will, in so much of what you do to bring people along with you.
Speak softly and carry a big stick, sort of the.
Yeah, but you know, not. You know, you don't have to be showing the stick. I mean, people know you have it, and you know that. Look, our military is second to none currently. Our intelligence maybe, there are a few other countries that are pretty good at it, as you've seen. But we have been the world leader. I'm glad to see that we're focused again on alliances, and which are so important. I'll just stop there.
So during your time on the Foreign Relations Committee, obviously the Iraq was probably a major, if not the most important issue you dealt with.
It was. I remember very early on, I came on the committee, and all of a sudden there was discussions about a surge in Iraq, and I remember going over to meet with President Bush and Dick Cheney and Stephen Hadley, National Security Advisor, and yes, I mean, it was, there were big decisions to be made early on. Of course, at that point, we were so deeply mired in the conflict that, certainly just withdrawing was not an option. And so how do you get to a place where you can try to get to the other side? And so, yes, it was heady. People were losing their lives. Decisions that were being made were so important. And really what was happening during that time, Mayor, is we took resources out of Afghanistan, which, as you know, everybody thought, quote, quote, was the good war. We took resources, huge resources, out of Afghanistan to Iraq. And what we ended up doing really is having years and years, as a result of that, years and years of just never really getting ahead of the problems that we were dealing with. I'm thankful that it's really interesting that Iraq is actually, and of course they have resources that Afghanistan doesn't have. I mean, Afghanistan's got nothing, okay, as far as resources and GDP, nothing relative to Iraq. Iraq at least has those resources, and the country is semi-functioning, and hopefully over time will become a more mature democracy.
Was there so you were involved with the Iraq issue under the Bush administration and then under the Obama administration. Was there a huge change in?
There really wasn't. I think, there was a big change. I think it was probably in the year, and I've never taken any notes, Mayor, and I probably, probably should have. I'd see other senators writing everything that happened in every meeting. They're going to write a book someday, but I just never thought about doing that kind of thing. But I think in the year about 2013 was when I think President Obama made a fatal move of really drawing down in a way that wasn't consistent with our responsibilities there. And then, as you know, we ended up, having to deal with that again. But generally speaking, no. There was a different tone as far as the way they spoke about it, but what we carried out on the ground for many years in the early years of the Obama administration was pretty consistent with what President Bush was doing.
In that same area of the world, Iran, obviously there was the Iran deal, which then the Trump administration got out of, and now I'm not quite sure where we stand or where the Biden administration is going. But what were your thoughts on that, and in terms of, number one, working together across party lines, but also what that meant for the U.S. in terms of it being a good deal or a bad deal? Yeah.
So, I had worked very closely with the Obama administration on the START treaty. In some ways, I felt like, without being too modest, that I really helped pull it across the line. To me, it was a no-brainer. We had way too many warheads that was wearing us out maintenance-wise. We didn't know whether they worked or not, and we were so much better off having a smaller arsenal that we knew worked, that we could rely upon. And some of the guidance facilities, I've been out to our labs and seen the development of these. I've seen some of our stockpiles, and this, believe me, this is far more sophisticated than some of the guidance systems we had on our nuclear weapons at the time. So to be able to reinvest the savings in upgrading, our nuclear arsenal was very important, and so I support it. So as we moved to the Iran deal, I, had worked with them closely on that. Obviously, paid close attention to Iran. By this time, I'm chairman of the committee. I ended up not supporting the Iran agreement. And, there was the major flaw in the agreement. And I think the deal came together, Mayor, in maybe October of 2015. So, we're 4.5 years away from it ending. But at the end of 10 years, there was a sunset provision. And it was a huge flaw. We were giving Iran the ability, they were using IR-1 centrifuges, which are like antiques. We gave them the ability during that period of time to develop IR-2s, IR-4s, IR-6s, and IR-8s. I'm in my office in Chattanooga right now with IR-8 centrifuges. In my little office here, you can develop vast amounts of enriched uranium. And so we were allowing them to develop those, helping them economically by relieving sanctions. And that was a major, major flaw. We also didn't deal with the ballistic missiles, which is a greater threat to Israel than the nuclear piece is. And we really didn't deal with what they were doing in other parts of the region. So I actually am kind of proud of this. I wrote a letter to the Obama administration. I remember in May of the year that all this was happening, and I asked them how they planned to implement it on a Friday, and I couldn't believe it. On Saturday night, they answered me and they said, we're going to go straight to the UN Security Council and do it by executive. We're not going to have any vote of Congress or anything else. So I got to work and unbelievably was able to pass a piece of legislation. I don't want to bore your audience with all the details, but they're actually pretty fascinating. I passed a piece of legislation with a unanimous vote out of the committee, and then a 98-1 vote on the floor. Senator Boxer wasn't present, to force the administration to bring that agreement to Congress. It was called ANARA. And it also forced them to lay out all the intelligence, all the appendixes, all of the things that go with an agreement like this. And it really educated the world. It educated us. It educated all the Senate and House members. And it was really the first real pushback that I had witnessed by Congress on an administration trying to carry out foreign policy. The Obama administration, and I had a close relationship with them, they were livid. I don't say that to be haughty, but they were truly livid because they had to wait 90 days to go to the Security Council. On the Senate floor, we were only able to get 56 or 58 votes. Chuck Schumer voted against the bill. Bob Menendez voted against the bill. He voted against them being able to implement. Senator Cardin. But obviously we didn't have the votes to stop it. The best way to do these things, Mayor, as you know, is to do it through a treaty. Because as you know, so then the Trump administration comes in and they undo it. I could tell you about some negotiations that went on there, but we'd probably be prolonging the topic too much. But now what it's done is Iran and Europe, by the way, are saying, well, look, if we can undo this thing every 4 years or be on and off, I don't know, the credibility of the United States is a little bit questionable here. As far as Iran goes, obviously they're not a good influence in the region. I know people there are highly educated. They're, in many ways, the civilization has been around for many, many years, but there's no question that they're doing evil things in the region, and the revolution, it's a revolution. It's just not over, meaning that the clergy there still believes it's ongoing while the people of the country does not.
They want to move on. And
that's right. The people of the country, I really think that, without this regime that's in place, but they are, I think there's a possibility that we could be like-minded on many issues, but with this regime in place, that's just not where we're going to be.
That it comes to mind when you're working on the Iran, when you're on the Foreign Relations Committee and serving as chair, you're working with the Secretary of State, who was John Kerry at that point.
Right.
And so somebody you had worked with on the committee does that make it easier having that personal relationship or experience together?
I don't know. I mean, John is, John's John. We did something together right after I left the Senate in Davos. We've always had a warm relationship. It was a little, things like that. I mean, people are personally invested, right? I mean, he'd spent, years. I don't know if you remember, but he in a clandestine way, while he was head of the committee, went to Oman to begin the discussions on behalf of the Obama administration. So when anybody's invested in their product, just like if you were trying to do something in the city of Nashville and the council revolts, it's testy. And so, yes, it became testy, but we never, ever got to a situation where it was unpleasant or anything like that. Actually, John gave us the opening in the committee. Tim Kaine, I'll never forget this. So we're having a hearing with Senator Kerry. Congress had put the sanctions in place on Iran. Congress had led putting the sanctions in place on Iran through the years, series of them. So I kind of set this up, but Senator Kaine says to Secretary Kerry, he says, well, Congress put these sanctions in place. Are you saying that we're not going to have any say on alleviating these sanctions? You're just going to go to the UN Security Council and do it all by yourself? And Secretary Kerry says, well, no, you're going to have a say. And Senator Kaine says, when? He says, in 8 years. So boom, the light went off. I knew right then I had an ally to pass the piece of legend I'm talking about. Kaine was the first, and then came along another one, and believe it or not, by the time we voted on it, it was unanimous. But John's a person I enjoyed working with, but sometimes he would conduct himself in a manner that would create openings for other things to happen.
Yeah, and so you worked. You were on foreign relations also when Secretary Clinton was there?
Yes.
And how was that? I mean, just
I of course, my Republican friends would become angry with me when I would say this, but she was very responsive. I don't remember her being on a foreign trip and me calling her about something that she didn't call me back that day. I mean, she was incredibly responsive. I had remember she had served in the Senate. She had served in the Senate prior to that also, and she was, by the way, a respected senator. Someone people knew. She had done her homework. She tried to work across the aisle when she was in the Senate. Her time there was not as eventful. She logged a lot of miles. More miles around the world than any other Secretary of State up until that time. And as you know, Mayor, sometimes you're defined by the things that are occurring while you're there, right? I mean, you could be a perfectly great, secretary of something, but if nothing's really happening, then, it's not acknowledged. And so it was a period of time when there really wasn't that much going on. I think she did spend a lot of her time, traveling, sort of being an ambassador, if you will, from the United States to the world. And then in the end, as you know, the thing happened in, oh my gosh, Benghazi, and I happened to be there, by the way, a week after it occurred, and so really had some tough times with the staff there and their losses and just everything. But the Benghazi thing, caused her to leave there. I actually was, overseeing the hearings. But caused her to leave there with a little bit of a taint, as you can imagine. And I don't know that we ever got to the bottom of all of that. But my point is, I had a perfectly warm, professional relationship with her, and always found her to be very responsive to anything I might have inquired about.
Yeah. And what's your sense now? I think you've talked about this already, where you talked about the importance of alliances and cooperation on an international level. And we went through a period during the Trump administration where there was less stress put on that, less of a priority. Do you think the Biden administration is moving in the right direction, and can they turn the ship fast enough to get us back where we're building our alliances and working together?
Yes, I do think they're moving in the right direction. And Tony Blinken, who I also worked with, he was an undersecretary or deputy secretary of state during those years too. Obviously, he's very oriented towards those alliances. So yes, I do. Now, again, I do want to say, when people see the significant departure that was seen, from years, 2017 to early 2021. And by the way, with NATO, I will say we did on the ground, what we were doing was stronger than we had been doing in years. But it was the rhetoric, if you will, the rhetoric that caused people to question what our commitment was. And so when they see our democracy and they see people, scaling the walls of the Capitol and breaking in, and then you see presidents, going in opposite directions, which, by the way, had just not been the case in modern history, right? I mean, presidents had a different slant, but they honored the alliances. And so I got to believe that these countries, while on one hand they welcome the reach out, they still are questioning what's going to be the case in 2024, 25 after the 2024 election. So I do think they're moving in the right direction. I will say, with a caveat, I do hope, the one foreign policy huge success that the Trump administration had, and as you know, I had a very raucous relationship with them. So I'm not saying this.
I've heard that somewhere.
Yeah. So the one huge success was the Abraham Accords. It's just phenomenal, Mayor, what's happening in that region. And, with the normalizing of relations between Israel and these other Arab countries, with more, no doubt, more to come. And what I hope doesn't happen is the just out of whatever, that the Biden administration moves to reinstate the Iran deal under similar terms to what it was. That is, in my opinion, a massive mistake. And they need to bring Israel along, bring the Arabs along, because the economic breakthroughs there are just tremendous. And things are happening there, Mayor, that have never happened. And so we need to keep that going. It economically, politically, could have a massive long-term benefit to the region.
One of the biggest changes that, in my mind, that the Trump administration did in terms of foreign policy was our relationship with China. I think certainly, whether it's political and the rhetoric that was in the election in 2016, Donald Trump talked about China in a different way than politicians had for ever, I think, in the United States. And the Biden administration is continuing to an extent of saying this is our number one challenge, this is our number one threat.
Right.
What's your perception of all that, thinking back now, pre-2016? Were we not paying enough attention to China, or are we too optimistic? Should we have done the Pacific trade deal? And then was Donald Trump right, and is Joe Biden right now?
Well, our countries, and you and Pat are far more steeped in history, I'm sure, than I am. But history is wrought with superpowers or strong countries being passed by other countries, and typically a war takes place when that occurs. And so, it's the most important relationship that there is for us to manage, no question. I think that what China was doing, what they're continuing to do in violation of the WTO, which we obviously allowed them to ascend to early on, what they're doing is violation in every way. They're stealing our intellectual property. We know that. They're not allowing us to compete fairly within their own country. And by the way, they know it. My counterpart over there, sure, that's what we're doing. And by the way, they would say, well, that's what y'all did during the Industrial Revolution. I never understood how the two worked together. I didn't remember it quite that way, but I think all of that was building, and the pressure was building, and you had people in our own country that that it was culminating here of so many people who thought their lives were going to be better than what they were. They thought they'd be economically better off. Their family situation just wasn't working for them. And so I think all of those things came together and created this populist moment in our country, which has happened in other countries, as you know. And I think, China was the perfect person to push back back on, both in substance, by the way, but also in optics. And so I think what the Trump administration did do, they did a great job of causing everybody in America to understand what they were doing. They did a great job of that. Both he and Secretary Clinton, if you remember, opposed TPP, and it's a shame that we couldn't have had TPP with some of the improvements we had in the NAFTA agreement. I mean, actually, some of the improvements we had in the whatever we call the thing now, the U.S. something MCA or whatever we call it. If those actually came from TPP. I mean, those concepts. So, we blew an opportunity, and the politics in our country wouldn't sustain it anyway. But we blew an opportunity to really have an organized effort against what China was doing. Where the Trump administration did not get good marks is we went mano to mano, and we did an attempt to try to pull the other countries together with us so that we had enough strength to really carry it out. And then we started throwing these willy-nilly tariffs around that just weren't even thought about, which were damaging. So they did a great job causing people to understand. And like you said, now Biden understands, the people of America understand. But we've got to do a better job of pulling other countries together, which will be difficult. Think about Germany, all the cars they manufacture. Think about China and the number that they buy, and growing dramatically all the time. So pulling people together will be difficult, but together we're so much stronger than we are one-on-one.
Right. It seemed to me that the Pacific Trade Agreement in 2016, it kind of hit the perfect storm where Donald Trump figured out that China as almost a populist issue, fighting trade, and then Hillary Clinton was running for president, and she wasn't going to support that because Bernie Sanders was going the other direction.
Right.
And that's probably what we needed. But free trade does not have the advocates it used to have. It's
I never did, I wasn't a poller, but I've seen recent polls where actually trade is, at least among Republicans, which, it obviously went down the tubes under the recent administration, but it's actually a net very positive issue today among Republicans. And, Mayor, I tried to push back on these willy-nilly using the national security waiver to throw tariffs on Canada, tariffs on Mexico, tariffs, it's just hurting U.S. companies, as you know well. It wasn't, he kept saying these other countries are paying for it. Not true. I'm sorry. And while you might be saving a few jobs in the steel industry with those, you were crushing thousands and hundred thousands of jobs in other places around our country because of the supply chain that was necessary. So I tried to push back on that. I had legislation to do that. My friend Pat Toomey and others were with me, Ben Sass. It's interesting. That is an issue that the Democratic Party just, not there, because so the politics of us rightfully pushing back on an executive taking advantage of the 1974 Trade Act in a way that was never envisioned. We just weren't really, we couldn't muster the strength to do it.
Well, let me ask you this question, because you have so many things to talk about, but one of the, I guess, existential issues in foreign relations now, and has been for several years, is global warming. And this, I guess we go back to John Kerry now with his current position. how do you see that issue? I mean, how do you see it the way that I guess the Biden administration does, in terms of this is one of the biggest threats to humankind right now, and it's something we have to address as a world? And how do we build the support to actually deal with this issue?
You know, I don't view it quite like they do, in that I feel more sober about it. It's not religion. You know, I mean, I don't mean that to in any way. Well, I am being somewhat pejorative, but you know, these issues they become religion, right? And so, you know, whatever. God, you know, I had a very unsatisfying meeting with I think his name was Jim Connington, who was President Bush's person on this topic. And I remember I met him actually over at the Capitol in one of these ornate rooms, and I remember him telling me, Bob, I mean, all these things like carbon tax and which I was open to, by the way, carbon tax, or, you know, of course, no, we got to have technology to make this work. And I thought, God, this is not a very fulfilling meeting. I want to, you know, I want to do something about it. I'm convinced that he was so right. And I look at what's happening in our country right now. I mentioned my Jeffries relationship. I mean, just what's happening in the whole pursuit of the private sector investment, you know, on the ESG efforts and all the things that are taking place. I really do believe that we are moving substantially to overcoming that issue in our own country. You know, the Paris Climate Accord, as you know, there was nothing about it that was binding. You know, every country made up their own goals, and I didn't think it was particularly useful for the Trump administration to get out of it. I'd rather be sitting at the table. And by the way, U.S. companies being a part of and I know many of them met in a ad hoc anyway, but wouldn't we want to be leading the world in these new technologies, which, by the way, we are in so many ways. But I think that, you know, it's really so much of what we do in government is wasteful. I think basic research obviously is not. But what I'm seeing, Mayor, is the private sector rising to the occasion. And I'm seeing, you know, investment funds, you know, making that be the case. And I think we're going to make a lot of progress on the issue by virtue of entrepreneurs and others investing in technology to make it happen. I mean, we're becoming here in Chattanooga, and actually the state as general, we're becoming the world leader in lithium batteries right now. And I was out at a plant today looking at a component of that. And so I'm upbeat about it, but let's face it, for the other developing countries, you know, telling them that, I'm sorry, you've got to stay at a very low GDP and low standard of living. That's not going to work. So it's difficult to get the world to act together because everybody has their self-interest at stake. But I see much progress being made. But for the people who it's religion, I mean, we got to embrace these small modular nuclear plants, don't we? I mean, we need base power. We've got to have a grid system that runs throughout the entire United States. I mean, we saw what happened down in Texas. To utilize these, you know, alternative sources of energy, but I'm not trying to be confrontational, but a lot of environmentalists don't want to see, you know, a national grid system because of what it. So I'm hopeful, and I say sober because I see so much happening in the world today that is demonstrating technological breakthroughs, which are going to be the solution to this issue.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, we're running out of time. I know there's some viewer questions, but what would you say to Tennesseans? This is sort of the heart of the work that this organization tries to do. Why should Tennesseans be interested in world affairs?
You know, it's obviously not as immediate as, you know, what you're doing as mayor of what you did as mayor of Nashville, but I especially recently, Mayor, I've been so despondent over people's lack of willingness You know, for a democracy to flourish, we have to have a citizenry that takes the responsibility to understand, to be an informed citizenry, or it's going to fall apart. I mean, we saw what happened on January 6th. People actually believing that Congress could overturn the Electoral College, or that Vice President Pence could overturn an election. I mean, and so I put foreign policy in the category of things that, if we are going to thrive as a democracy, we have to have informed citizenry. And obviously our place in the world, I go back to some of the things I mentioned about not being disrespectful, but senators were always, there were some senators, not all, some, that were always trying to be the, you know what, and trying to do things in foreign policy that were damaging to our nation, damaging to the world. And I just think that for our citizenry to understand, to demand appropriate reaction to things is important. It's not as immediate as what's happening in their hometown. It's not as immediate as what is happening in their state. But let me just tell you this, the thing I fear most, things go back and forth. Biden did $1 trillion COVID bill. Republicans did this. I mean, things kind of go back and forth. The thing that would be a world war of some type breaking out is the kind of thing that I worry that we wander into without thinking, and it escalates, and all of a sudden we've done huge damage to the world. So it might not be immediate, but believe me, very important to pay attention to what we're doing around the world.
Well, also, I mean, if you look at your time as working for the state in finance and your time as mayor, I mean, one of the things that Tennessee has really benefited from under Democrats and Republican governors has been foreign investment. Chattanooga, obviously, Volkswagen stands out as a huge deal. Nissan here, Japanese investment in the U.S., Canadian investment. There's a world out there that we can trade with and work with that will benefit us all.
No question. And those relationships are so important. And of course, the city in our state that's benefiting more from this than anyone else is Nashville. And certainly we've had a continuum of people like you who've reached out. And let's face it, I mean, our environment here is so conducive to foreign direct investment. It just is. So no question.
Well, let me just conclude with this question about the future. I mean, looking at national politics in this most recent election, you're a young man. And do you have any inclination to get back into the game? If you were being considered for a position in the federal government, would you consider that? Or are you moving beyond that at this point?
So, especially when things began to happen after the election, where, people weren't even acknowledging that an election had been won, and we moved on into January 6th. And so, yes, I mean, I had a 2-year sabbatical, Mayor, where I just didn't say anything publicly, and I began speaking out. I view myself as I'm not one of those people, everybody says when senators wake up every morning and look in the mirror at the next president. I just never have been that way. I'm not saying that I just haven't. Certainly when people mention to you, which they mentioned to every senator, okay, you ought to run for president, it makes you think about it a little bit, but it truly is just not on my mind. I'd like to be a part of the conversation. Thank you for letting me be a part of this one. I'd like to be a part of the conversation as to where our country goes, but I just don't view myself as the person that has to be doing that, although that is the one place where you can truly change the tone, the way the country feels about itself, where it's going. The other positions, not so. And as far as serving in a cabinet or something, I don't know. Today is just not something that's on my mind. But I thank you so much for asking, and And who knows what happens in life. I tell young people, you're told all the time that life is short. And, and what I tell them is, yeah, life is actually long. You just never know, the relationships that you have, the things that you do, how things circle back around. So just make sure as you're traveling through this life that you're treating people with respect, you're dealing with your issues with integrity, and who knows? I mean, my guess is, Mayor, you'll be in a cabinet long before I ever will, and I just don't have any thoughts of that. I truly don't.
Well, let me just say, I'm speaking for Karl Dean as a Democrat, as a former mayor. Your voice is one that is needed in the United States, and your sense of moderation, of working together, common sense, those are all things that are important. So I hope you give it consideration. And again, you got a lot more to give, I think. So thank you for doing this. And I'm going to ask Pat if there are questions that we can go through here.
Mayor Dean, thank you. I've been chomping at the bit here to get a couple of questions in, but you did a great job teeing up all the critical issues. And Senator Corker, thanks so much for doing this. And let me also thank you for the time that you've spent when we bring delegations of students from Tennessee to Washington when you were at the Capitol. You didn't just show up for a photo op and walk away. You sat down and talked with our students, and they walked away from those meetings really impressed with understanding what was going on up in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and they appreciated your time and your service. We missed maybe one or two questions that our audience was observant enough to ask, and I've got one. We're low on time, so maybe a quick response. I know it's difficult, but COVID-19, the U.S. role in the world. We're talking about vaccines to other countries, American participation in the WHO. What insights do you have on how the United States' role in the world dealing with COVID-19 should play out?
Well, I mean, I noticed where the Biden administration is now shipping dosages of AstraZeneca, I believe, other places. And so,
I think Mexico was in the mix today.
Yeah. Look, we need to support the World Health Organization. It's again, another one of those ways that the mayor was referring to, of us being able to come together and help deal with other people. I do think that obviously we need to do everything we can to get our own citizenry vaccinated as quickly as possible. But and that's what those organizations are for, right? For it gives us the ability to take care of our own citizenry, but we have a pool of money and a group of people who can help make it happen in other countries that just don't have the resources to vaccine their own people. So we need to be part. And y'all know this because you're so informed, but most Americans think that we spend vast, 20% of our budget on foreign aid, on foreign issues. Y'all both know, I know, including the State Department, and everything we spend on foreign policy and that kind of thing, and all of our aid, less than 1% of our budget. And I think a nation as great as ours, again, should lead and with that 1%, spending it wisely, but helping other people's quality of life be better. As you know, uprisings, extremists, they really fuel themselves in places where there's discontent. That's a long answer. I'm sorry to take so long.
No problem. Let me squeeze in one from Professor Tom Schwartz at Vanderbilt. What do you think American policy should be toward Putin's Russia? We had another report released, the DNI, this week talking about Russia and the election. But Putin, Biden says he's a killer. What should we be thinking about how we deal with Russia?
Well, the reason we have to deal with Russia is they have a large nuclear arsenal, but on every other scale, I mean, they're the size of Italy, economically. So it's a country that punches way beyond their weight. Putin is a savvy guy. I mean, he outfoxed us in Syria. It's unbelievable what he did. I mean, he so quickly turned the tables on us in Syria. So I don't look at them as a different kind of relationship. Obviously, we need to continue to have arms treaties, and obviously we need to bring China in for it to have any impact anymore. But they're basically, you know, they have a chip on their shoulder about where they are relative to us, you know, the unraveling of the Soviet Union. And so Putin basically is a nuisance, right? I mean, things that we try to get done in the UN Security Council, he tries to not get done, trying to undermine it. But beyond that, so we've got to focus on them. But to me, they're not the focus. They shouldn't focus. They shouldn't be the focus of the majority of our efforts. They're a nuisance.
And as we're out of time here, let me just ask one closing question from Ambassador Charles Bowers, one of our board members at the World Affairs Council. How do you think President Biden is doing in the foreign affairs arena? Is he off to a good start?
I think his tone has been very good. I think Blinken's tone has been very good. I'll go back to the Middle East issue. I'm very concerned that instead of building off the one thing that you can say was, or at least one of the things you can say the Trump administration was successful with, I'm very concerned about them wanting to jump too quickly back into the arrangement with Iran. But you know, it's so early to tell. So right now we're still in the tone period, and the tone's good. But as you know, that only lasts so long, and we'll see how they carry themselves out. I'm interested to see what they end up doing with some of the trade issues that have been problematic also.
Well, we have many more questions, and hopefully we'll invite you back and you'll accept, and we can do some more of this, because there's certainly a lot we can learn from your insights and perspectives on international affairs. And on behalf of the World Affairs Council, thank you again for doing this. Mayor Dean, anything to close with?
No, just a final thank you to the Senator, Senator Corker. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I really enjoyed the conversation. Wish you the best going forward, and we do want you to come back and do this again. You have remembered a lot, and you obviously have been thinking about a lot. So I think you got a lot to offer the foreign relation people here in Tennessee who are concerned about these issues.
I can't remember having a more enjoyable 1 hour interview in my life. So thank you, and thank you for going easy on me. And I know your audience is far more steeped in foreign policy than I am. I hope they suffered through this, and I hope it was worthwhile for them. But thank you so much. What a pleasure it's been. And I look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Same here. And on behalf of the Tennessee World Affairs Council, thank you to everyone who came out tonight. We appreciate you becoming members and supporting the World Affairs Council through your donations. A reminder, just check our website, tnwac.org, for our upcoming events and for the opportunities to become members or to support the World Affairs Council. Thank you again, Senator Corker and Mayor Dean, and everyone have a safe and pleasant evening. Good night.
Thank you.